Hello and welcome to another European Tour Junkies show. I am delighted this week to be joined by Tom Jacobs of the Mayo Media Network, Odds Checker US, Lost for Words podcast. As you can tell, a lot more versed on European Tour stuff than me. Tom, delighted to have you on this week. Welcome on board to the Tour Junkies.
Mark, thank you very much. Glad to be a part of the show. Don't sell yourself short. I've obviously been doing it for a couple of years or so, but you've been doing a fantastic job. Easy to run a show on your own. I've not tried it yet, but I've imagined what it would be like, and I think you've done really well. So glad I can help you out this week, and going forward, it should be good as well.
I'm just hoping you can rub off on me coming off a win last week. How many wins that this year? You've been doing fairly well. Even your co-hosts and stuff have been going well.
Over the Mayo Media, we had 5 picks over the year. It's probably about 4 or 5 again, and Lost for Words as well. For a little bit of a spell at the moment where we've had 2 in Mallorca, the 1-2 last 2-2 in the Portugal as well. So been pretty impressive. But as we know, Mark, it's not the easiest thing to sustain. But hopefully one more event before the European Tour bows out.
That's it. Like I thought I was doing well knocking on the door last week with Minwoo Lee and Adrian Meronk, and then I see basically all the Twitter touts and everyone else seemed to be on Hansen. It was like, all right, okay. Back to the drawing board. I did think to myself, right, we're having the new DP World Tour, European Tours in the back window. Things are all going to change, and then I can change it up. I can rip up my model. I can get this off season, and then I hear we're back going again in another week or so. So no rest for the wicked.
It's like the PGA Tour. I think at least takes off a week, and we haven't even got that this time. We're down in South Africa next week. A lot of Challenge Tour guys to learn about. So there's going to be plenty to learn, Mark. But we can figure it out and get moving before the year's end.
That's it. So this week we're off to Dubai, but I want to just get a bit of a background about yourself. So as I said before we come on, a lot of my PGA betting was sort of built around what I was doing. And then I was a member of the Tour Junkies for a couple of years, and then I thought they needed a guy to do the European Tour. I stepped up, and it's sort of been a baptism of fire. But you've been living and breathing this for a couple of years. Firstly, where do you find all the time to watch the European Tour, PGA Tour, put out content, and maintain a job? So just a little bit of background about yourself would be great.
Yeah, so I think it's probably dating back to maybe 2012, 2013. There was a guy called Mark Golf Bets for people out there that have been following along for a long and he used to produce these form sheets, right? It was literally just course current form. And I just did some bets with that. Me and my dad were just betting every week on golf. Figured we were doing quite well, and I sort of dived into it. And it was originally a website called the Football Family, which we branched off into the Golf Family. Started doing a lot of written content. I've got to be honest, got a little bit disillusioned with just writing every week. I think there was quite a saturated market. And then when the lockdown happened, the pandemic happened, I decided to launch the Lost for Words podcast. Had a lot of good guests on there. Me and Jason obviously now run the betting show each week, and now obviously part of Pat's Mayo Media Network as well. So really, really fortunate to have a lot of places to talk, and Odds Checker US now as well, PGA Tour content. So just like I say, it's just reps. Like just constantly just talking golf. How I fit it in, I don't know. I've already done 3 shows this week, and you know what? It just never gets dull. Like that's the best thing about it. Like especially like there's just so much going on. The times don't work out. I mean, the round was basically over the last 2 times I woke up at the weekend. On the Thursday and Friday. But the weekend was not so bad. But you do get some decent events during the year where it works out better.
Yeah, it's one of those ones as well. I think we touched upon it. PGA Tour, you have an abundance of stats and websites and information to hand. European Tour, we go into it, and the week of the tournament, the course doesn't even have any stats or yardage or anything. Each week, it's a lottery whether we're going to get strokes gain data for individual players within the field, and it's a different kettle of fish from the PGA Tour.
I can't remember which event it was, but they actually had the caddies doing the strokes gain data at one of the European Tour.
Mallorca was definitely one.
And I can't remember the guy who it was. French guy, I think it was. He had strokes gain that was like, it might have been Gourier, might have been Scare Seagrass. Yeah, he's like his approach numbers were like 12 strokes gained, and it was like that's just absolutely true. Like he's in like 47th place. This is inaccurate. So interesting to see how it goes on.
I know I've talked to one professional bettor, and he says when he approaches the European Tour, he basically just knocks out the bottom 15% of the field before he does any stats or adjusted numbers or anything at all. Just knock out the bottom 15-20% of the field. It's a lottery whether you're going to get stats for them. And the big difference with the PGA Tour, the European Tour, is that you have I don't want to be derogatory towards the bottom end of the European Tour at times, but a lot of amateurs come in, a lot of locals come in, and will sort of skew those numbers, if you like, if you're working off strokes gain data and that kind of thing. So he just wipes out the bottom 15-20% of the field and really does his adjustments based on everything else. So
I think that's pretty smart. I think it's so hard. You say you've got Fancy National on the PGA Tour, really good stuff. We've got I use Tour Tips over here. That there's some good data, but it's not quite up to the level. I mean, you go on, like you said, the European Tour website is so basic. 1 week we had a course where there was just 18 holes at 440 yards par fours. So it is a bit of a lottery, but we know what we're dealing with this week, and that's the main thing.
That makes a big difference, and that brings us nicely into the course breakdown and key stats. So this week we are at the Earth course of the Jumeirah Golf Estates in Dubai, which follows on from last week's tournament at the neighbouring Fire course. Par 72, 7,675 yards. Greg Norman designed course. Bermuda greens, large, undulating, fast, firm, not to everybody's liking, so that might be a differentiator for us this week. Measuring around 12.5, 12.6 on the stimp. Course itself, little less exposed than last week in terms of to the wind and the elements, but definitely plenty of length. Stuff I've looked at this week in terms of the stats then off the tee, driving distance, fairly stereotypical that I'm falling into, and I've looked at adjusted strokes gain generally, tee to green. Putting, for me, the putting side of it, you really have to look at quite niche golfers who can adapt and play well on fast greens. So there is at least one guy I'm fading this week in the DFS side of things, and obviously in my matchup as well for best bets, where I think he prefers slower greens and has his eye in on those sort of things. So I'm taking one on. Anything in particular that you've looked at this week in terms of stats? And obviously we have a lot of course history to work off as well, which helps.
Yeah, I think one obviously the course history helps a lot. I think there are certain events in a season where it counts for more than others. I don't think it's any real one standout. Like if you look at the winners here in the past, you've got Matt Fitzpatrick, you've got John Rahm, you've got Danny Willett, Rory McIlroy, Henrik Stenson. It's so broad. Like generally speaking, other than Matt Fitzpatrick, it's kind of just pure ball strikers, green merchants. Alvaro, Robert Carlson, early winners here, like long off the tee. But if Matt Fitzpatrick can win anywhere, then you know that it's a kind of course that sets up to anyone that's hot that week. I think, like you say, it's just going to be getting the putter hot. Slightly less exposed than last week, but I think the form I don't necessarily think it's massively beneficial to have played last week, but I think those that did play well last week can carry that over. And I also think that just generally Middle Eastern form, like if you play well in Dubai as a classic, if you play well in the Abu Dhabi Championship, that's always really going to serve you well here.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's completely remiss of me. I missed out on the podcast juice, and it sounds like you've rated the old Christmas store from last year. What have you on this week for the podcast juice?
So I've got a stout about it is called, and it's supposedly a vanilla stout, so a really fancy version of a Guinness. All I can tell you is it tastes like an ashtray. I'm going to get through it because that's part of the show. But it's good stuff. It's going to get me going. I've got a day out in London tomorrow as well, so get started early. And cheers, Mark, for having me on.
Cheers. Well, I am in exactly the same boat in that for the second week in a row, I didn't get to the off license or the liquor store, as you call it in the US, to sort of find a niche beer or a niche drink. Dubai, as you know yourself, it's quite difficult to get alcoholic beverages full stop. You flagged one to me on Twitter that's sort of a niche beer, but I've had to end up rating leftover Christmas stock from last year, and I am on Disaronno, which is obviously an Italian liqueur. So cheers, Tom, and welcome, as I said, for the show. So we will have a look at the top of the betting board then. And it's one of these weeks where it's obviously a condensed field. I think it's a 53-man field.
Yeah.
We were looking at the tee times earlier, and poor Uh, who was it? Sorry,
James
James
Morrison's unknown,
Morrison.
isn't he?
Yeah, is on his own. Like how, like for me, if you were inside that top 60 race to Dubai all year, sort of on the bubble, and then they turn around to you and you finish 55th, or Andy Sullivan like last week thinks he's maybe done well, got over the line, and then sorry guys, it's going to be invite only outside of the top 50 available players in the race to Dubai, and you end up on a field of 53. You don't even it out at the minute. So logic, I have no idea where it comes from on the European Tour at times. Um,
The invites as well. I mean, look, Lee Westwood was the winner of this whole race to Dubai last year, and he's not here. And the year that he had, I know he's tailed off and things like that, but you start inviting. I understand Patrick Reed's a pretty good supporter of the European Tour for all his negatives
yeah,
that people have about him. Sergio Garcia is a stalwart of the European Tour and just played pretty well at the Ryder Cup again. So I can understand why they're here. But Andy Sullivan, what was it? I mean, he was just 5 birdies on the eagle to finish off, thinks he's got in, fist pumping all the house, and gets told he's not in. And Podrick Harrison was sweating in the entry as well. So it was tough. I mean, it's not a good look. The people that can win the race of Dubai this week, it's not great for the European Tour. That's all I'll say.
I think that's probably something we should touch upon for anyone that's not familiar. The format this week is sort of twofold. We have the normal tournament. That's what the bulk of what myself and Tom are going to be talking about. But there's also the race to Dubai. And how many guys, Tom, is it that can actually win the race to Dubai this week?
So you've got Colin Morikawa, Billy Horschel, Tyrrell Hatton, Minwoo Lee, Matt Fitzpatrick, and Paul Casey. Colin Morikawa is leading the way, and I think he played one regular European Tour event. So it's a tough scene.
Yeah,
at least Billy Horschel won at Wentworth.
That's it, and we'll come upon the picks in a minute. And Billy Horschel is one of the guys that's going to make my card, so it is that. Like when I'll get into it whenever we go over the actual card. But certainly with Billy Ho, he's been a good supporter of the tour. He's won on the European Tour this year, and still think there's a bit of an inflated price about him. But we'll get into that shortly. Top of the betting board, then. So you can make a case for so many names in this field. There is a wide variety of guys that are in this short range. Rory McIlroy at 6-1, Colin Morikawa 8-1, Matthew Fitzpatrick 14-1, Abraham Answer 16-1, and then Garcia and Fleetwood at 18-1. It's a fairly good, obviously for European standards, it's a top end field. We have a lot of names there. I was very, very drawn to Rory this week. The change of coach was something that was drawing me in. Going back to basics, obviously coming off a win as well. I was drawn to him, but the price at 6-1, whenever you have such a competitive field put together, it just wasn't enough for me. Maybe it's one of these ones that I'll jump on in play, have a look at round to round, maybe look at some individual matchups as we go in. But at 6-1, I couldn't get there. Elsewhere on the board, Fleetwood's going to be my first pick. We'll talk about that shortly. But I think you can make a case for all those guys at the top of the board. Was there anyone that sort of was on your end of things that you were close to?
So I think Fitzpatrick would have been for me, obviously 2-time winner at the event. He's been pretty rock solid all season long. Obviously had that win at Valderrama. The 2 wins and a 4th, about a guy that just repeats form wherever he goes, right? I did like that. It's funny you talk about Rory McIlroy because I just find it really easy to fade him because in betting, obviously, just because when he's 6-1, right? I mean, anyone basically that we put on our card this week, if you do a top 5 or an each way, we'll pay the same odds, and I haven't got to sweat over him winning the tournament. McIlroy is going back to basics. I think there's still a little bit of confusion. I don't think Pete Cowan realises he's been fired yet. So I think that's still a little bit.
It sounds a bit that way,
yeah. But look, 2 first, a second, a third, a fourth, and a fifth, and another top 9 as well. I mean, he's had one finish that you'd say was really poor here when he was 20th out of 50 or 60 then. So look, it's Rory McIlroy, it's a European Tour, but I'll go further down the board.
Well, I'm going to start off then with the betting picks, and my first pick is Tommy Fleetwood at 18-1. I ran through, so we talked about it before. Obviously, with Fantasy National, we don't have access to European Tour data. One site I do use, and I know you've referenced it on your own shows before, is Data Golf. So I looked at the last 24 rounds, which is something we would do quite a lot if we were using Fantasy National doing PGA Tour. You hear DB and Pat on the main PGA Tour show talk about Fantasy National all the time and looking at the last 24 rounds in different categories. Tommy Fleetwood grades out second in this field in adjusted strokes gained total at the minute. So he's got the form on his side. And at 18-1 compared to some of the other guys who are ahead of him in the betting side of things, I think he's starting to put the game together. Looking at it, obviously got win equity, hasn't been there the last 2 years on tour. He is always making the cut, or 9 times out of 10 he's making the cut. I think it was 3 missed cuts this year in 2021, but hasn't got across the line for the win. He's a good enough golfer to get there, and we've seen, as I say, recent form. He's heating up nicely. Last missed cut was a way back when at the PGA Championship. 3 top tens of late at the Italian Open, Alfred Dunhill and the Zozo back on the PGA Tour. And warmed up nicely then with a T13 finish last week at the Fire Course. So a player that for me has the win equity long term. He's been out of form for the last couple of years, but we're seeing signs on the board now that he's starting to come back around. 18-1 in this field, I'm happy enough to take a chance over some of the other guys that are around him at the top of the board. I could have made a case for like Sergio Garcia. Obviously, course form ticks a lot of boxes there. Matthew Fitzpatrick as well in terms of the course form. And then you take the other guys at the top of the board with Morikawa and Answer, and maybe not having a few more question marks about how they adapt over here. So especially Answer as a course debutant. So Tommy Fleetwood at 18-1, he starts my board. Have you any thoughts there?
My only thought with Tommy Fleetwood is, so it's always been tee to green right with Tommy Fleetwood. Like, that's just what he is. Like, he's a brilliant driver of the golf ball, great approaches, and he's always been a little bit suspect on the greens. And when he was back winning regularly, he was volatile on the greens, but like a Morikawa. Like, one week he just hit, and when he hit, he was winning or contending. And the last couple of years during the pandemic and stuff like that, I think he's been quite mentally affected. Young family, I'm guessing. I don't know. But he seems to have not been right. And I think that's slowly turning around. I think either side of the Ryder Cup, we've seen some good performances. You look at the current form, he's obviously 5th in the field for that, 2nd, 7th, and the 13th recently. But I think maybe because I've watched too much of him recently, just on the putting greens, visually just worries me. I mean, because Wiesberger, who I'm going to come on to in a minute, is not putting well, but he's hitting the ball better than Tommy Fleetwood, and I believe that Wiesberger can make more putts than Fleetwood. Now, I'd love Tommy Fleetwood to prove me wrong. He's an excellent, European Tour player, brilliant ambassador, but I just think there's a bit more upside in the next guy.
Yeah, I find it hard to argue. Would you be surprised if last 24 rounds Tommy Fleetwood is 10th in this field in adjusted strokes gained putting?
I would.
That surprised
After
me.
Watching him, yeah.
Yeah, and I don't know whether they put too much weight into just PGA Tour stuff over European Tour stuff, but yeah, the man you're about to come on to then is Bernd Wiesberger at 20-1. So tell me why you're putting him up as your first selection.
Look, everybody's going to be putting Bernd Wiesberger up, so I'm not going to be original by any means. The only way I'd be original is by fading him, but he's by far and away the best tee screen player in the field at the moment. Very similar to kind of like Russell Henley on the PGA Tour for guys that are watching that. He's just a putting stroke away from winning, but there's enough to me to believe that he can just start making the putts when it happens. And I kind of thought stupidly that people would be off him because his course history isn't great. He's got a 4th place finish here, and other than that, it's pretty sad. But even the last couple of years that he's been here, he's put in some decent rounds, and I just think he's a better player than his course history suggests. And yeah, I just think he's got all the winning upside. We've seen him win, 4 or 5 times over the last couple of years. Like, we know what he is. He's just got himself in the Ryder Cup. So yeah, I love what Bernd Wiesberger's doing. He should have won last week. There's no, obviously I paraded around at a JB Hansen win, but if Bernd Wiesberger had anything like a putter, I think you could have putted for him, Mark, and he probably would have won. But yeah, look, all he needs is a good putting week and he'll win.
Yeah, he's on the data golf side of things. He's first in tee to green, first in ball striking in this field, first on approach, 5th and off the tee, and they're adjusted last 24 rounds. But it's that putter, 51st in this field, according to their adjusted stats. Now, as I said, I have a feeling that they're maybe overweighting the PGA aspect against the European Tour fields, but certainly the putter is the one that he has to come around. Generally, you've been doing this for a long time, do you find that poor putters, when it's fast and firm over slow, do you find much difference there in terms of even putting surfaces? We're Bermuda here. Do you get a chance to really dig deep into do poor putters do better on a faster surface over a slow surface, anything like that?
I think because, like you've referenced at the start, that the stats are just not as good on European Tour. Like, I think you just have to kind of manually do it, and I just don't, because I
Yeah.
could spend all that time on it and he'll just putt terribly anyway. So I think when you've got with Fantasy National on the PGA Tour, where you've got the splits of different green surfaces, it obviously pays itself off. But for me, I'm just kind of hoping, like, and it is purely like guesswork as to when, like, if either of Fleetwood or Wiesberger putt well, they're going to be like the 1-2, and I wouldn't be surprised at all to see that. So I'm just going to ride Wiesberger and hope he gets that victory he deserves.
Well, I'm going to go on to a double pick here because they're both at 22-1. And that's Paul Casey and Billy Horschel. No introduction needed to any of the PGA Tour audience that are joining us this evening or on the podcast as well. For Paul Casey, I think we touched upon it earlier pre-show, where he sent me a message on Twitter. I flagged up that Standard DraftKings, they have a big out listed against Paul Casey this week, and I said, listen, that's a nailed on DraftKings selection. The more I started to dig into Paul Casey, looking at the history in not just Dubai, but in terms of the region in the Middle East, he has a lot of win equity there. And obviously the price point as well at 22-1. Started off the season with a win. Where was that? Sorry.
He's in Abu Dhabi, wasn't it?
It was Abu Dhabi. I knew it was in the Middle East somewhere. Abu Dhabi do.
Dubai, sorry. It was Dubai Desert Classic.
Was it?
Yeah, it's all my fault. Don't worry.
Dubai Desert Classic, yeah, at the start of the year. And I can't remember if you remember the pictures at the time, but he was so emotional to get over the line after a bit of a dip in form in the last couple of years. I think there's going to be sort of fond memories coming back to the region now. There's no pressure on him to do well in this sort of loaded field, if you like. And I just think that weight off Paul Casey and the ability just to go out there and play his golf is something that suits him generally. In terms of the stats wise, I think the putter again is the concern there for me with Casey of late. But some of the other stuff, he grades out 9th in the field in adjusted strokes gained total over the last 24 rounds, 6th on approach, 8th tee to green. So we're getting another decent ball striker on side. I don't have too much concerns over the length side of things. So in general, it's a golfer that's sort of going under the radar a little bit, likes the region, has win equity when the pressure's off, and I struggle to come away from this week. So at 22-1, that's my second selection. And then Billy Horschel as well. Yeah, you opened up the show by saying that the likes of Colin Morikawa and stuff, they haven't really done their service to the European Tour this year. They're here on majors and that performance, which you can't take away from the high end golfers. But Billy Ho, anytime he drops into the European Tour, comes over here again, it's another high-end golfer that just looks relaxed when he comes over to the European Tour. There doesn't seem to be the same fanfare about him, unless the West Ham supporters or players are sort of getting in around him. Won at Wentworth in impressive fashion. And in general, another golfer that I just think at the price point at 22-1, and see him as high as 28-1 in places, lower down on DFS at 9,200. It's a price play for me that Casey and Horschel coming in relaxed and nothing to prove, if you like, against some of the other guys that maybe Rory has a bit more pressure on him. Some of the European guys have a bit more pressure on them. I'm happy to have both those guys on side this week.
Yeah, and a couple of things with that. I mean, obviously, Paul Casey, you saw that not being a pressure on him. I mean, if he gets to Sunday and he's got a chance to win, there will be, because he can win that race to Dubai, but it would take a lot. Like, Morikawa's got to drop down, Horschel's got to drop down. Like, it probably still won't happen. And realistically, like you said, like what you referenced there about how emotional he was from the Dubai Desert Classic, and it was actually the major at the PGA when Morikawa won that back at Harding Park, where it really looked like he was really jubilant about it, and he realised that he'd done basically everything he could have done that week, and Morikawa just beat him, and that's a really good feeling. Like, you didn't throw it away. There is nothing else that you could do. So I think he's in a really positive place. I think that if he gets in amongst it over the weekend, he'll be fine as well. As I said to you earlier, if you're taking someone a bit further down the field, it's got to be someone elite, and him and Billy both fit in that bracket. There's a question from Colin Thompson about, is Paul Casey out of the field? He's not. The out sign is just lingering over from a couple of weeks ago when he pulled out on the PGA Tour at the Zozo. So no concerns there for Paul Casey. Billy Horschel's funny because he loves West Ham, apparently. I think this is good for it, whatever his agents have set up, right? But he got asked what was his favourite golf course in the southeast of England. The person that asked it was probably expecting to say Wentworth, considering he just won there. And he racked his brain saying that he doesn't think he's ever played in the southeast of England. Oh, no, wait, yes, I have, once at Royal St George. So he said Royal St George. And I was like, no, you won at Wentworth. So, that's what I find funny about Billy Horschel. But he's great. And as you say, I think the PGA Tour guys come over and they know they're better than 90% of the field. They know that all the fans are going to be appreciative because people like Billy Horschel, Bryson, they kind of divide opinion in America, right? When they're out in the ropes, like people heckle them or whatever. On the European Tour, they're just so grateful to see these guys because they're so talented, and that I think it does suit them. So I don't even think it's just purely field strength. I think, like you say, it's just the relaxation and things like that. I think the courses suit them, and they just fly away.
Absolutely. Your next pick is a European Tour stalwart, but he's obviously won recently on the Sunshine Tour. Tell me about Dean Burmester.
Yeah, Dean Burmester is one of those, like I just said, you have to have winning upside is one, and I think you have to have signs that you can mix it in this field, and that's why I didn't want to go too far down the board this week. But when you look at Dean Burmester, he's got 2 top 4 finishes here, and a 14th when he shot 76 in round 2, I think it was. So he's already mixed it with the very best in this field. Obviously loves the golf course. I thought he could go back to back, winning the Sunshine event and then coming into Dubai, and he didn't. But that's nothing to really hold against him. He was first in the Tenerife Open earlier in the year, 4th in the Canary Islands, 6th in the Betfred British Masters. So he can go on a run, and he's now returning to a golf course that he absolutely loves. So I was actually quite grateful that once it realised he was, because I actually bet him last week at 25-1, and once it realised that he was out of contention, I was just lapping up the bogeys, hoping that he was just going to drift out to a price this week because I was going to bet him no matter what.
That's it. Like last week, I took him at 25-1, put him up on the Tour Junkies show.
Yeah.
First couple of days, I thought, oh, we're in the mix here. Maybe that travel, maybe the fatigue kicked in a little bit. Excuse me. And he sort of faded away as the week went on, and a couple of my other guys started to come into contention. But yeah, you're right. 2 4th place finishes here. Distance off the tee, given the length of the course, it's not something we typically see on the European Tour. So yeah, ticks a lot of boxes, and you're getting him at 40-1 this week, 25-1 last week. Obviously the step up in terms of the class in the field, but he has all the game to do well again this week. So can't put anyone off Dean Burmester.
I think, like you say, there it is a step up in class. So the price, the 40-1 doesn't excite me, by the way. Like, it's not like, oh my God, you have to go and bet him. But I've come to this kind of realization myself that even if I made Dean Burmester 45-1 and 40-1, and 40-1 wasn't value as opposed to thinking he's rated 25-1, I'd rather back him at 40-1 and miss out. So I kind of stick to these guys. Like, they make perfect sense. Why would I go against it at 40-1?
And it's another guy next up at 50-1 and Danny Willett that has win equity again. Maybe pressure off a little bit, a bit like Horschel and Casey that I touched upon, but you're getting an excellent price point at 50-1. Tell me about why you're on Danny Willett.
So again, it might just be a little bit of bias. I had him at 100-1 at the Dunhill Links, biggest win of the year. But look, the reasons I picked him at Dunhill Links was because he's had great courses history there. He's played very, very well in that event, obviously won it in the past. And then you come to a course where he's gone 1st, 4th, and 5th here at the DP World. After really struggling with it for a long period of his career, he really come out and figured it out. And I just think with Danny Willett is like, he needs something to get him going. Like, he's now won a Masters, whatever it was, 2016, 17, whatever it was. How do I get myself up for the magical Kenya Open? How do I get myself up for, whatever? So when he goes to Dunhill Links, there's a bit of tradition there. He's played well in there in the past, so he wanted to get that win. It comes to the DP World Tour, he can go and take down Rory McIlroy, Colin Morikawa, and he can do that. Like, I won't pick anyone in this range I don't think can actually go on and win. And I think that's very important. Like, Dean Burmester, maybe. I think Willett's actually got more win equity than Burmester. I think Willett's probably the better bet, but Burmester's probably the safer play.
Yeah, I can't put you off Danny Willett at all this week. We're going to just keep rattling on here with some picks because we're try not to drag out the show too much. I know. For the Lost for Words podcast, I listen to it on my walk in the mornings, usually on a Tuesday. Like so this morning, listen to your podcast, listen to Golf Betting System, typically back to back, and I think you go for an hour and a half typically.
So that must be a long old walk. Yeah,
yeah. Two times speed.
Yeah,
Same when I'm listening to DB and Pat's, take it on 2 times speed, and away we go. I just want to touch upon briefly. So obviously the message in the chat came in there about Paul Casey. DraftKings do not pay any attention, full stop, to DFS contests for the European Tour. And it wouldn't surprise me. Like last week, we had Sam Horsfield in a very similar position, listed as out. And then you had a lot of guys ranting on Twitter, like he was supposed to be out. Why is he not there? If guys aren't listening or watching our show and we're talking about Paul Casey, he is in this tournament. You're probably going to get lower ownership in terms of DraftKings off the back of him being listed as out. And also Joachim Lagerin as well is also listed as out on DraftKings. And to my knowledge, he's teeing up as well. So yeah, the DK just at the minute, European Tour doesn't really come in. And we're obviously an NFL season, NBA system. It's understandably
Football
dropping
season.
down. It's all...
It's all season, isn't it? That's what matters at the moment.
Yeah. So yeah, it's dropped down the boards. But yeah, always double check your references. Check tee times over what DK are listing for players being out, because 9 times out of 10 they're actually going to be playing and it's stuck in the system from a previous week. I think Andy Sullivan was another that was listed out maybe last week or the week before and obviously teed up and played. So definitely don't hold water into what is listed on the DK prices, and yeah, do your own research in the background. So Paul Casey, as I said, is absolutely in this week, as is Joachim Lagerin. We've had no additional withdrawals outside of the tee times that are out there at the minute. I don't believe anyone's coming in for 54th place, Tom. I haven't heard anything. I know Podrick Harrington was sort of third on the waiting list, and he said, no, I'm off, I'm away on my holidays. So yeah, it sounds like we're set with a 53-man field. Per James Morrison, teeing off on his own. I think he's the longest priced golfer in the field as well, at 200 to 1, 275 to 1 in places, and just 6,100 in DraftKings. So
I've got to be honest, Mark, until you sent me the screenshot to say he's playing on his own, I wasn't even entirely sure he was playing. I don't quite know how he's made it here.
He's got there.
I backed him earlier in the year in Spain, and he shot an opening round 60, and I think he finished like 35th. Like, he broke the course record and just nothing. So I've put James Morrison firmly in my rear view.
Your next pick then is Garrick Higgo at 70 to 1. This one surprised me of all of your picks. So, like, when I looked at the adjusted strokes gained, he was sort of dropping down there. I think his form has been erratic, perhaps. So why Garrick Higgo? What's drawing you to him this week?
Yeah,
a decent price point as well at 70 to 1.
I think for me, like, there's two of these reasons, really. One, I think, like you say, he's erratic, but I consider it volatile in the sense that he'll either, place or miss the cut. Well, the good thing here is there isn't a cut. And I just think he's the type that can just go and shoot at 63 on Sunday and just fly himself up the leaderboard, 64, whatever. And when you go, I was a massive believer that he was actually a bit of a flash in the pan, and I was obviously wrong, because he went on to go and win the Palmetto on the PGA Tour, which, again, maybe a little bit of a gift. Chesson Hadley should have won that there, shouldn't he? But, for me, he's proven himself at the European Tour level. He's now gone and done it at the PGA Tour. Last 2 events, 34th and 64th, are obviously nothing to shout about, but Bermuda, he was really, really good for 3 rounds. And I'm pretty sure he had a 63, I think it was, in round 2, at Mexico as well. So just for me, I just think that there's plenty of opportunity for him to score. So that 70 to 1 is more of an each way or a top 5 play for me, just because I think he can climb the leaderboard. And I think he's perfect for DraftKings scoring. Like, I just think he can go on a run and just get some streaks. I think he's a guy that can go in pools when people are birdieing. And, you don't have to worry about the mixed cut. That's the main thing for Garrick Higgo.
Yeah, I can't argue with that. Like, I think he grades out 45th on the adjusted strokes gained, but he's 22nd in the field and off the tee. He's 28th in approach. So the ball striking is absolutely on side there with you. And then some of the other stats as well. He grades out 18th in driving distance. And this is the one from Tour Tips, Stanley's site. So on putts attempted over the last 15 weeks, he's 10th in the field. So, yeah, Does that add up with what you're saying with the eye? Because on strokes gained putting, he's 33rd, but that's an adjusted number, and obviously Stanley's number is a bit more raw.
Yeah, and I think for me, look, he had that win at the Palmetto, and I think he probably wasn't expecting to win the PGA Tour. Like he thinks he probably hang there, but all of a sudden you're like, I'm a PGA Tour winner. That's a 2-year exemption. A lot of miscuts and a lot of withdrawals since then, or a withdrawal, sorry, at the St Jude. And it's not been great, right? 75th at the Zozo, 34th in Bermuda, 64th at Maracaibo. It looks terrible, but just the fact that those low rounds are still there, just the fact that when he comes back to the European Tour, the depth in the field is going to be gone. I know we've got the top guys, but once you've got past the top 6 or 7 in the betting, maybe 10 in the betting, is there anyone more talented than him? Upside-wise, probably not. A guy that you're going to come on to in a moment as well is someone that I like for the same reasons. I just think there's a very clear bottom tier of players in this field, and he's not in it.
Yeah, and I would say I'd say Skylar's probably a bit surprised that Guido Migliozzi's coming in at 90 to 1, 110 to 1 in places. So that's, the PGA Tour guys, Guido seems to have fallen off a cliff in terms of his form from earlier in the year. He's coming in at a bigger price point than these two guys in Garrick Higgo. And then my final selection at 70 to 1 is Adrian Meronk. 8th place finish last week, and I was on him at 66 to 1. 37th in the race to Dubai. He's had a solid all-round season, but he's still seeking that maiden tour victory. Does he have the upside to win here? Probably not, but he has the upside to be in contention and to be getting those points on DFS and to be really in the mix again for another top 10 finish. The driving distance off the tee, he has, he can shoot low. He desert form, 2nd place on the Challenge Tour in 2017 at Alhambra Golf Club, also in the United Arab Emirates, and a 27th in the 2020 Saudi International. He's just a player that's sort of trending into nice form. He came in last week and just went about his business very quietly but successfully. I think if we look at the likes of a Minwoo Lee, was quite similar in terms of up the board and was knocking around all week, just putting together nice rounds, and then didn't really get himself into contention. Meronk's coming in at a much bigger price, and for me at 70 to 1, I have to have a little bit of a nibble on it.
He's just got that skill set that you want in a modern day golfer. And I know that's a very easy thing to say, but he just absolutely mashes it. He makes a lot of putts when he gets on a streak. I don't think there's a glaring weakness in his game. It's not like he's a bad putter or he's bad chipping like JB Hansen was last week. I was petrified he was going to have to chip at any point. I just think he's a very, very solid golfer. And to be honest, last year, when he lost, he came 2nd in the Alfred Dunhill Championship in South Africa. He did shoot a fine around 76, so you could say he threw that one away. But he was going up against Christian Bezuidenhout, who's obviously a favourite over there. Tenerife Open, where he was 3rd. He was 6 shots shy of Dean Burmester, but he just went mental on the final day. 3rd at the British Masters, just missed out on the playoff. He's just been very, very solid. Even the Italian Open, he was 2nd there, 67-66 over the weekend, to lose by 1 to Nikolai Højgaard, who gets all his plaudits. So, for me, that there is winning upside. I think that he will. I hate to deal in uncertainties, Mark. I don't know how many times you've probably heard me say that when you've listened to me. I don't like dealing in uncertainties. I don't like saying he's going to win because this is golf, right? He could just disappear off the face of the planet. But I see a win in 2022 for him. If he can go and place in the top 5 here this week, which I think he's got the upside to do, I think he's very, very good on DraftKings, then I think he's a good play.
Yeah, for me, I touched upon Minwoo Lee there, and Adrian Meronk can have the kind of season that Minwoo Lee had this year and sort of pre-pandemic coming in. I think Minwoo Lee's next step is onto that PGA Tour, getting some majors under his belt. I think he's knocking on the door now to qualify for the Masters and stuff. There's a lot of career progression imminent for Minwoo Lee. I think Adrian Meronk is one of those golfers that can now sort of make the progression on the European Tour up to that status where they get some wins under their belt in 2022, at least one anyway, maybe get into some WGCs and different bits and pieces through exemptions and qualifications. And absolutely, he's a golfer, as you say, nice all-round game. There's plenty of aspects to like, and he's flying the flag for Poland, which isn't necessarily a golfing nation, if you like, as well. There's lots to like about him. He seems a likable character, and hopefully he is one that kicks on now in 2022.
Yep.
Let's talk very briefly before we pivot to the DFS side of things. So you cover PGA Tour in a lot of depth as well, for the different guys that you work with. And I had a chuckle when I was listening to, I think it was the Lost for Words one that you referenced this morning. Yeah, it was when I was listening to it. And the guys on the Tour Junkies Patent DB obviously broke down the RSM Classic last night. If you haven't listened to that, definitely go and give it a listen. Watch back the show. I'm sure there'll be more content coming out from the guys in the next 24 hours. But this RSM Classic was one last year that I put my hat on, and there was a golfer in the field that I felt was going totally under the radar, and I put all my eggs in one basket last year, had him in every single DFS lineup. And then I listened this morning and I heard you reference, you pretty much did exactly the same thing in Davis Thompson. And yeah, Dad was the course clerk or lots and lots of links and stuff. And I thought, great, the amateur record, everything was coming together. He was going under the radar, had money on him in a lot of not matchups, sorry, but top 20s and DFS exposure, every single lineup put him in. And then he, day one, went absolutely atrociously. And it sounds like you were in a similar boat last year as well. So maybe not Davis Thompson this year, but he's one that's probably going. I will probably come back to when I'm doing a bit of PGA work tomorrow when I get a chance. But is there anyone that's sort of under the radar this week at the RSM that you like? I've sort of put you on the spot a little bit.
I guess it's tough. No, I guess it's tough to say under the radar because he's a former winner there. But I think Tyler Duncan's been overlooked because I think people don't believe that he can win twice at the same golf course. But when you actually look at it, even before he won there, he had a 25th place finish, and he quietly shot a nice 66 on Sunday in Houston as well, which was really impressive. I think he only had one bogey, and for me, it's just people that just cannot seem to think that he can't go and do it, and that for me is wrong. I think he absolutely can. You've seen Robert Streb do it. If Robert Streb can do it, he can do it. I don't think he's a spectacular player, but he can perform where he performs. Lee Hodges is someone that keeps flashing up to me for some reason or another. I don't know why. I haven't looked too far into it. And the other one is Chad Ramey. You mentioned Data Golf earlier. He's kind of like 64th in their adjusted rankings as opposed to 168th or something in there.
Sorry, their overall, their exactly world.
That's it. Yeah. So, I mean, that's obviously weighted a lot to recent form. But for me, those would probably be the biggest outsiders I'd go for in that event.
We have got some guys in the chat, and I'm seeing a lot of familiar names from the Nut Tot. But if any of you guys are tuning in and you're looking at the European Tour field this week, who would you back this week? Who's your favourite bet to finish in the top 10? Drop it in the chat, and also put the word out there on Twitter. Like and subscribe. Get some more Tour Junkies audience onto the European Tour or the DP World Tour as it's going to be in the future, and send out some love as well to Tom there on Twitter. So, Tom, what is your Twitter handle?
My Twitter handle is TomJacobs93. So any abuse, just direct it that way, and I'll be sure to take it on the chin.
Oh, there was one recent review, I think, of Lost for Words that you put up that I had. Yeah, I couldn't believe some of the stuff that certain reviews come out with.
I engaged one person on Twitter based on something he said, who was someone that I'd spoken to a lot of the time in the past, who we got on quite well with as far as I knew.
Oh, really?
And he picked up on the fact that I said something about Hideki Matsuyama. He didn't like him, and it was wrong. And he's just said that we were clueless. And then the last 3 weeks, we had the first and second in the field and 2 seconds in Portugal. So,
Karma. He probably came and listened to my show instead, and then he doesn't get any winners. So that's what happens.
If that's what he wants to do, if he can't get past the third show, that's up to him. But look, we're not, it's not for everybody. Like, everybody has their own thing. But for me, like, Tour Junkies doing absolute great work. That's why I wanted to be on here. I'd obviously go and review the Tour Junkies website and click the like there as well, because Apple Podcasts, that drives all the popularity. It's key. Like, as a podcast creator myself, I know how important that is. Like, we are, what's the time here, Mark, at the moment? It's midnight for us over here. We're grinding away, trying to produce the content as best we can. Yes, Josh Kistler, his name was Jeffrey, I believe. So yes, we've got another Jeffrey on the European side of things as well.
Lovely. Yeah. Definitely. Like, we'll get into the DFS picks now, because it's one of those ones. DB and Pat obviously start off their show with the DFS and then get into the betting side of it. My background and my work and my full-time job is all in the betting industry, so that's why I sort of go the other way around. And obviously, contest-wise, we don't have as much of a selection, but I have to flag it straight up. that the 10K contest this week is potentially going to have an underlay because an overlay because there's I think when last I looked there was 800 people that were signed up for it, and I think the entry cap is around 2,400 or 2,300. So any guys that are listening to this, hopefully we're going to put a lineup together at the end of this, do the 1 minute men, and hopefully we get some winners. It's DFS side of things this week. There is a plethora of golfers you can get to, and I'm going to kick it off then. So 9K range, and it's very, very boring. Tommy Fleetwood at 9.8 and Paul Casey at 9.4. I don't need to say any more about that. What I am going to say, though, is my fade in this range is Tyrrell Hatton. And Hatton, for me, is a golfer that has done well here before. I think he finished, was it 10th last year? Yeah, 2nd and 10th the last 2 years. So, course history, he's going to draw a lot of ownership in terms of the DFS side of things. Off the tee at the minute, in the adjusted numbers, he's grading out 47th. Overall ball striking 37th in the adjusted numbers. That has to be a concern for someone coming in at 10K. And the putting side of things, so I can't remember, it must have been the Alfred Dunhill where slower putting surface, and he was interviewed live on course by Sky Sports, and he was talking about how he feels more about getting his eye in on a slower surface, and he prefers that over the faster surfaces on the PGA Tour. And that sort of stuck in my mind, and we touched upon it at the course breakdown side of things, where maybe there are golfers here that like a slower green over a faster green, and we're obviously getting a faster undulating green here. Now, that doesn't back up with what the 2nd and 10th place finishes in the last 2 years show me, but at 10K over some of the golfers at the lower end 9K range, I am going to put up Tyrrell Hatton as my fade. Which two guys have you landed on?
Yeah, no, just to follow on from Tyrrell Hatton is that you look at his course record and he's got 6th, 2nd, 8th, and 8th. So he's going to go on to that kind of ownership. But when you look, he's had a 22nd and a 46th here. And I was looking at
Tommy Fleetwood there rather than Tyrrell Hatton in terms of the course history. Sorry, yes. So the course history, it's hit and miss. He has the 2nd and 2/8 and a 6th, but then there's the mixed in the 22nds, the 46. So yeah, there's a bit of a mixed bag.
I think that kind of bolsters your point. Right, because the golfer that I'm going to come on to, that I'm going to take a chance of in the top of the 8K range, that you just wonder if that's going to be the more likely result. Like, they've had 2 really bad finishes here, and they just happen to be. I'll just go with Fitzpatrick. I know he's going to be popular. He's a 2-time winner. I'll take the hit on the ownership. You have to do it. And I think I'd probably have a go at Sergio Garcia just to differentiate as well, because I think that he's been incredibly solid. I think he's going to be really, I don't suppose he's grateful for the chance to play here, but he knows he's not here entirely on merit. And his last 3 starts here, 4th, 9th, and 6th, and loves this part of the world as well. So happy to take Sergio there.
And a fade. Is there anyone you're taking on?
I think it's tough in this kind of range, isn't it? I think for me, if I had to, I will take on Abraham Answer on the fact that I don't know what he's going to do. And when it's a don't know, I'll take a chance he's not going to be here.
Yeah, I think I was between the two of them, Answer and Hatton. Answer, obviously, course debutant, 10.8 is quite a hefty fee for a DK side of things. So, yeah, I can't argue with that. 8K range, and I'll let you kick it off. You said you had a pick in the 8K range that was stepping out to you. So, who's that?
So I think for me, absolutely nobody is talking about Patrick Reed. And I don't know if it's because he's kind of got this late invite. I don't know if it's because people don't like Patrick Reed. I know he's not playing very well on the PGA Tour, but everyone was kind of reaching at him about the fact that he was 22 to 1 the Bermuda field and how ridiculous was that. And I know that I think if he'd have carried on that form and finished kind of like top 20, top 25 since in Mexico and Houston, then maybe they'd be all over him. But I think the fact he's had a couple of decent rounds in that time. There have been some poor results, but better rounds than the seen in the eye, I think. So Patrick Reed, for me, I think could be worth the chances. Just looking at his course record here, 10th, 2nd, 28th, and 3rd. Now, I've got to remind myself that he's actually played here that many times. Like, that's ridiculous. Like, he's played here 5 years of the last 6. He's had 1 really bad finish, and you would probably point to that 28th as the most likely result. But I think people are just going to go everywhere else in the 8K range. I'll take a chance at the top of it with Patrick Reed. And And then I think you're pretty safe with Minwoo Lee, right? Like, there's no miscut potential where he could just lose interest. Like, he's just going to score all, really, really well. Obviously, Dean Burmester's in those two guys. If you need cash, obviously go to Burmester. If you've got some left over, take Minwoo Lee. And I will fade Antoine Rosner. Absolutely hated what he did on Sunday last week in Dubai. He literally could not aim far enough right and still missed the left-hand side of the golf course. He was absolutely appalling. When you look here last year, he was coming into the win and he was 36th. So strikes me as that he's maybe a bit inconsistent. We know that about him already. Unless he can fix that golf swing in a space of 2 or 3 days, I'll see him finishing quite lowly down here.
Yeah, well, my 8K range was Minwoo Lee at 8.7, Thomas Peters at 8.6, and my fade was Anton Rosner. And then I put in brackets Reed ? I think Patrick Reed is probably the easy fade for people this week if they're coming into it. Anton Rosner was the one that stood out to me for all the reasons you're saying, so can't argue there at all. The Patrick Reed one, what I try to weigh up when I'm doing the ownership is that if we have a lot of guys that are just thrown into a golf contest lineups because it's golf and they usually watch the PGA Tour, are they going with name recognition? And then a Patrick Reed, for example, jumps up in terms of ownership over some of those European Tour guys. And I think at the price point that they're at the minute, Patrick Reed at 8.9, Will Zalatoris at 8.8 is going to attract interest. Even Shane Lowry, I don't want to be derogatory towards our stateside friends, but they might be looking at those and going, well, Shane Lowry is European. He's going back to Europe. He's 9K. That's a guy that I can get to. Patrick Reed, I know. Will Zalatoris at 8.8. Oh, that sounds like good value, stepping down in class. And then there's our guys on the European Tour, and Minwoo Lee at 8.7, Thomas Peters at 8.6, coming just below that price point, and hopefully, or maybe going on under the radar to a large percentage of guys that might enter the contest this week, given the 10K stake that's there. And I think it's a 30,000 overall prize pool, which is, exception to the norm as it is for the European Tour. So that's why I'm sort of pivoting down to those guys. And we've seen the recent form with Thomas Peters that is obviously trending in the right direction. So yeah, 8K range. I think I struggle each week to try and nail down 3 guys in a fade in the 8K range because I'm usually drawn to a lot of guys. But this week, Anton Rosner was absolutely the standout. And even in previous weeks, Victor Perez is usually my standout fade. But I'll drop down and I'll kick off the 7K range. And Adrian Meronk at 7,200. Now, this has been a love-hate relationship. I don't know if you've caught any of the shows, but completely and utterly avoided him at Valderrama. Rightfully so, and made a few quid in matchups as a result. Was the previous week and the week after was on him, got a fairly good return. I don't know this week that is he being completely under the radar at the minute, that he has shown glimpses of recent form on tracks that don't necessarily test your all-round game, that you know there's not a lot of pressure off the tee and that side of things, and maybe I don't think the rough is particularly penal. Maybe you know more about the in terms of the course than me, whether it is penal, but it doesn't come across as particularly penal. And Adrian Meronk is one of these guys he can spread about off the tee, and then the short game can get him out of a hole more often than not. So that's a guy that I definitely like in the 7K range. And Nicola Højgaard at 7,000 really surprised me why he was coming in this low. Just looking at a very consistent golfer this year that has almost outdone his brother, who was on the radar long before Nikolai, if you like, maybe to wider audiences. So 2 guys that I thought 7,000 and 7,200 I definitely like. My fade, very, very easy for me, is Robert McIntyre at 7,600. I just can't get to Bobby Mac at the minute at all. Completely lost his way, really. And I just hope that if he's not going down to South Africa, I assume he's not, that he just gets the time to reset and refocus and get back to where he was. I think we thought that was going to happen in Scotland with the Dunhill Links, where he came home to, I think it's Oban, is it, he's from, that he had that bit of downtime and maybe the game would come and pick back up after the Corn Ferry disappointment, but it just hasn't happened. And I think he's here because he has to be here rather than maybe through absolute choice. So hopefully he gets few weeks or a month to himself now to reorganize. But yeah, easy fade for me at 7,600.
Yeah, and look, for me, I think that Nikolai Højgaard's going to be very, very popular for very good reason. I like what you said about the fact that he's, everyone remembers Rasmus because he got the win first, and he's obviously gone on to win 3 times. But Nikolai Højgaard actually comes second to Sergio Garcia very, very early on. He was 19 or 18 even at the KLM Open. And when you listen to their amateur days, and certainly from what I've seen over the last 6 months or so, there's not much in between them. If anything, I would say they're more well-rounded. So obviously Rasmus has got the wins. I think he took advantage of the pandemic last year where the courses were a bit more resorty, and he can go back to back. For me, it would be Sean Crocker in this range. I'd love to take him as an outright bet. Someone asked me who I'd bet blindly next year on the European Tour, and it was him, between him and Meronk. He is just like, we're talking about Wiesberger and Fleetwood. He's kind of that light, whilst also being worse with the putter. Like, he is putting. So I think that for me, again, just because there's no miscut, just because I know he can go and shoot at 63, the putter gets hot, I like him. I obviously like Garrick Higgo for the reasons I spoke about in the bet. I'll fade Richard Bland in this price range. He's been brilliant. Like, he's proven me wrong all year round, right? But I just think it's got to come to. He's been talking about a tear in his knee. He's obviously been playing well while he's got a tear in his knee, so it's hard to kind of go against him. But he's only played here once, and he wasn't very good. And to me, it's got to tear. I think he's tried to rest it as best he can. I think he'll put in an admirable performance, but certainly going to fade him here.
Yeah, I think definitely the which brother gets more ownership? That's a very good question, Josh. I honestly
I'd say
don't know.
Nikolai, just because
Nikolai
he's
probably on short-term form. Is he cheaper as well?
Yeah, he's 7,000 and Rasmus is 7,400.
Yeah. I'd say Nikolai then. Get the higher ownership. I love dropping down this range. Like, I'm trying not to get the show too long-winded, but like, there's everybody within this field, you and me will probably have been on or had ownership in, or there's been a narrative to them throughout the PGA Tour, the European Tour this year, where we've backed them in DFS or we've backed them on betting cards. Like, I've been all over Kawamura at times. My next guy when I jump down into the 6K range is Johannes Veerman, who I was on last week and was absolutely abysmal. So not going to say too much about that. He has got here. Last week he was coming off a 5-week layoff. He's got hopefully dusted the cobwebs off last week. Maybe doesn't have the necessary game to excel here, but in terms of off the tee, 20th in adjusted stats, 26th in approach, and then just all around ball striker. So we've got it's like a poor man Sean Crocker, if you like, where the ball striking side of things is all great. The short game is what lets him down at times. So I am going to put him in just because I think he's going to be very low owned. I think a lot of lineups will fill out with a 6K range, and he's in there up against Guido Migliozzi at 6'9" and Rafa Cabrera-Bello at 6'8". So he is not going to be the guy that's going to draw attention in there, and that's why I'm going to put him in for the 6K side of things. And the other 6K guy was Adrian Meronk. Yeah, don't need to talk too much about that. I've already gone over why I like him. Adrian Meronk might be one of your 6K guys, is he? Or have you gone with Skylar and Guido? Or?
No. I would definitely go with Adrian Meronk. Just to give you a different one, Thomas Dietrich is obviously the same. I think the upside of Thomas Dietrich is very, very good.
Definitely, yeah.
But for me, my favourite player of the week, which is pretty ridiculous, is Jason Scrivener, 61, which is pretty frightening when your favourite play is basically the bare minimum. But I'll try and make the case for him. So he was tied 10th in this event on his debut 2 years ago now, I think it was. It may have been last year ago. And that was basically down to a fine around 65. So he's a guy that I think just carries on going, no miscut, suits him perfectly well. When you go back to his location form as well, which is something you can pick up on tour tips, he had a second place finish to Tyrrell Hatton back at the Abu Dhabi Championship earlier in the year. He's had 2 top 7 finishes in the Dubai Desert Classic as well. And he was 31st last week, where his best round actually came in the first round, but he was coming off the back of the Corn Ferry Tour finals, travelling over in the same week, so I can forgive him for running on fumes there. But he shot 63 in that final round of that Corn Ferry finals, which is so typical of him because he was poor for 3 rounds. And I think that's potentially something that could happen this week and go 70, 71, 68, and then just go 63. I think he'll be. I think he'd just be a brilliant play to have there at 6,100. It gives you all the opportunities to go all as you like. As a fade, obviously quite hard in the 6K range because
you don't even have to worry about it.
You don't have to worry. There we go.
No,
excellent.
6K range. You get a free rein on the Tour Junkies. We're not going to put you under pressure to fade a guy in the 6K range. I think we could all maybe get down to the bottom, like Tapio Polkin in there and his bucket hat, and yeah, like that's what I'm saying. There's guys who have done well on tour this year in that 6K range. It's fairly competitive in general. That there'll undoubtedly be one or two that do shock or outplay their value this week. Yeah, it's a range that I'm sure we will dip into on DFS and try and put some lineups in. Which brings me to the 1 minute men. I have stolen this from Pat and DB. I reckon we can be competitive. Say there's 10K at stake here if we can nail a lineup. What we're going to do is put 1 minute on the clock. Tom, you're going to kick off. Then I'll do 2 picks after that. Then Tom, me, Tom to round it out. So 3 picks from me, 3 picks from you. Are you ready and up for the challenge?
I'm ready.
Okay, let's hit it then. And give me who you want in your lineup first.
Jason Scrivener at 6,100.
And no.
Bernd Wiesberger at 9,600.
Oh, you're going straight in with 2. Right, okay. Let's see. Yeah, well, I am going to go to Paul Casey at 9.4. And I will also take Min Woo Lee at 8.7. We have 8,100 average left, 6,200 on the table, 30 seconds gone. You pick. You pick, and then I'll pick the last.
I will take Dean Burmester.
And I have 8.2 to play with. Poulter's 8.2, Willett at 8.1, Perez 7.9. I am going to drop right down to Nicola Højgaard. Let's leave some money on the table. A lot of money on the table. Differentiate ourselves. We've got Casey in there. We did it in 57 seconds. I'm happy enough. So Scrivener, Wiesberger, Casey, Minwoo Lee, Dean Burmeister, Nicola Højgaard. We've left money on the table at 1,200. You have to try and put yourself away from the field. I think ownership-wise, we're going to be fairly on side. We haven't gone to the top of the board, so I'm more than happy with that. Let's just get to the best bets then, Tom. You did put up Jason Scrivener, top 20, plus 260 on FanDuel, probably available on Paddy Power and Betfair as well. And you've touched upon it already in terms of all your reasons as to why you like him. I'm going to go with Billy Horschel over Tyrrell Hatton at plus 140. Really, really surprised the market has gone against this one. I said I've touched upon why I like Horschel. I've touched upon why I like or dislike Tyrrell Hatton this week. Plus 140 on BetCris, plus 125 on Pinnacle. So the sharper books are actually fading him. I don't think Data Golf have him on side either in terms of this matchup, but I am more than happy to take Billy Horschel over Tyrrell Hatton as my best bet. And Tom, we've gone over an hour. That wasn't the intention at all, but I am more than happy and delighted you have joined us tonight for this show. Where can guys find you? Where can guys find you?
Just to apologise for going over the hour. That's me. I ramble an awful lot. You can find me on Twitter, TomJacobs93. You can also find me on the media network for the European Tour Picks and Bet Show, which will be the DP World Tour Picks and Bet Show soon, and the Lost for Words podcast on Apple, everywhere else, Spotify, Amazon, etc.
Excellent. Well, listen, I am more than delighted, as I said, to have you on board this week. Let's try and have some good juju from your recent wins and your colleagues' wins, and let's bring it to the Tour Junkies European Tour this week. Even DB and Pat are hitting winners now every single week. So, listen, I have to up my game. I'm going to get a winner across the line. I don't know whether it's going to be Adrian Meronk at 70-1 or Billy Ho at 22-1, but absolutely, guys, we're going to hit a winner this week between us. Tom, you've been excellent, and I'd like to just say thank you very much. Cheers, Tom. Cheers, guys that have joined us on YouTube. It's been an absolute pleasure. Thanks, fellas.
Thank you.